since it's 5:30, I'll call the Board of Adjustment meeting to order. First, we'll have a roll call. Larry Hefner here. Ken Anderson.
Here.
Dana.
Here.
Brian.
Yep.
Ken.
Yes.
Vizier and Aaron. Aaron's here. We'll go right into the first public hearing, and you want to read that and give us a staff report. I'm going to go sit down there. That's a relative of mine. It's my grandson, actually.
Okay.
So I will come back when we get done with this one.
I will be taking over
All right.
this
Thanks,
one.
Dina.
Thank you.
Okay. Please take notice that the application was received from Tyler and Ashley Oldenburg for a variance of setback requirements in La Crescent Township for a variance of, for the variance of setback requirements to meet the required 50-foot setback from the north property line to build a deck, a variance of 36 feet from the west property line for an existing garage, a variance of 33 feet from the north property line for an existing woodshed, a variance of 46 feet from the north property line for an existing chicken coop. A hearing on this application will be held at the Houston County Commissioners Room at 5:30 on Thursday, September 26th of 2019. Anyone wishing to submit written information regarding this hearing must do so by Tuesday, September 17th of 2019. And this was advertised on September 11th of 2019. So this request is actually, or is due to limited buildable area on the parcel due to slopes. Like I said, they're seeking multiple variances to accommodate existing buildings. In 2014, this was a new parcel was created from the parent parcel, which was done prior to them purchasing it, and so, like I said, these two of the existing buildings were, the nonconformity was not created by them. And then they're also they're looking to put on an addition and a deck, and that deck will encroach on that property line variance as well. They can't go, it looks like in the aerials it may look like there's some room if you move towards the road, but they actually, if you go too far, that will actually kind of get into situations with slopes there as well, and then their well is actually on that side of the house. So that kind of limits them from going in that direction. They do plan to move, there's an attached garage kind of in the current driveway direction, so they are coming in going that direction as well. And so, as you can see, it in the pictures, not so much as from the contour line, but the slope right alongside the house where they're proposing their deck and their addition is actually only 0 to 2%, and that was verified by myself. Do you guys have any questions on the staff report?
Any questions? No.
No. I guess if Tyler and Ashley, if you guys want to come forward, you're welcome to kind of discuss the site too with the board as well. If you have anything additional to add that I missed. Sorry, I should have invited you up right away.
Could you state your name for the record, please? So we know.
Tyler Oldenburg.
Ashley Oldenburg.
Thank you.
I don't really have much to say. We didn't know that this was going to be an issue when we bought it. If we would have known, we'd have tried to do something different. But I guess thanks for your time. And
Yeah, we are hoping to do an addition on our house, and the four variances would be appreciated for approval, especially since two of them, well, only one of them is regarding the actual location of where we'll be building. The other ones are just kind of they were brought up because of the application or
When we bought the property, we went through a surveyor and the lawyer's office, and it just, nobody had said anything about it being an issue, and we contacted the township and it wasn't an issue on their end, so I guess that's, you know.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's all I got.
Just gonna say the parent parcel had multiple outbuildings, and so if you're looking at splitting it off, as far as keeping some outbuildings with the house they currently reside in, there was just no way. There's also no way to do so. There's not enough space between the buildings in order to meet setbacks.
Are the Anthony and Lori related to you, or,
Yeah, they're my parents.
okay?
And they still own the property around,
Yeah.
that surrounds this parcel?
Yeah.
The way this looks to me is that the way this property was divided, I assume that Anthony and Lori created this division, is that correct?
Yeah.
with the help of the surveyor.
They bought the property with our house on it, and then they wanted the land, and so they got the land and we bought the house from them. The
They-
land and the buildings, I guess.
They also created the same situation for themselves. As you can see on the property lines, the setbacks are not appropriate for them either. So if they ever decide to build or add on or anything like that, they're gonna face the same problem. And I would say that there is a way that property could have been divided off with about approximately the same acreage and not had any problems.
We'd have still had problems between the garage that's by our house, cause we kept the garage, or we wanted a garage.
But now you're gonna create a new garage,
An
right?
attached one,
Yeah.
yes.
So you
Yeah.
wouldn't need that one.
I still,
We wouldn't want to tear it down,
No, I mean, it would,
yeah.
I could show you here, but it could be given to them, and then you could extend your property into a rectangle, which would, and cover all the bases. There would be no requirement for any setbacks.
I guess one of the reasons for
variances.
putting a new garage on is because I need more space. So that would make it so that I wouldn't have that space. I just,
Something else too, you mentioned moving the property line would be more to the north, if I remember right. Their septic system is also, you said, located over the hill west of your house, and then there are some property line setbacks with your soil treatment areas and things too. I'm not exactly sure where that extends to, but that might maybe create an issue as well.
and by doing that, we'd also be encroaching on the farm. They farm out that property, so they'd be losing their farmland, and that's usable farmland for them.
I would suggest that you could just let them farm it or rent it to them or whatever, you know, but
Yeah.
Any other questions? Are there any comments from any members of the public regarding this site? Sure, you can come forward. Yep.
I'm Lori Oldenburg. I'm Tyler's mom. And when we bought the property, we didn't expect to sell it to them, but they wanted to buy it, so we were happy to sell them a portion of it. But we knew right away that the house was too small for them and that they would want to be building onto the house. So we were under the understanding that what we were selling them was enough space, and that, I mean, that's been the plan all along. And any of the areas that are in question, they are not negatively affecting us in any way, and we are in total support of them having the variances to be able to add on to their house.
Would you be willing to redraw the property lines to fix these problems both for them and for yourselves?
I would really not wanna do that, if that was what we had to do, but, like he said, he doesn't wanna have to give up the garage for one. He uses his garage for working in, and the attached garage is just gonna be a parking in garage, so that would really take away from him what space he has now,
And before we bought the property, it was rented out by another tenant, so we weren't the first people to live there after they purchased it. It just, you know, it was a while after we bought it. It's, you know.
How many members have visited the site?
I have not.
Brian?
No,
No.
I haven't.
Okay. It looks like a real small footprint, isn't it?
Yeah, and the whole thing is kind of a zoning nightmare
I see.
around there.
Just looking at the pictures, it's real small.
It is.
Public here or zoning staff, I would suggest that just because in this case the owners of the adjacent properties are related, that doesn't necessarily mean that they function as an entire unit. So hopefully they do, but perhaps there's dynamics where that's not the case. And I think the standard that you apply to this should be the same whether or not you're dealing with relatives who own adjacent properties and you split off properties and sell them, or complete strangers who do it.
Or whether they won't.
Or both, correct. It seems like perhaps you're kind of threading a needle where because of the relationship here that they could work it out, whereas
No, that wasn't my point. But that does also cut both ways then, the fact that it's okay because they're there to have this encroachment because they're their children doesn't make it okay for the next owner as well. I mean, it is something that cuts both ways.
yeah, so I guess I would just encourage you to, wherever you formulate your standard for how you view these, separate parties should be considered as consistently as possible regardless of whether they're related.
Could I join here? Want me to sit down or, you can hear me, when I was the zoning administrator in La Crescent when they did this, it was done under La Crescent Township zoning ordinance. So, and I talked to them when they did the split, and I distinctly remember telling them that you should respect the setbacks as well as you can, but there's nothing in the ordinance that it controls splits. I looked before this meeting, I looked at that at the time, and that's a deficiency, I think, in the ordinance that was there at the time, because they did not address splits. When they did the splits, and I think that's pretty common with many of the splits we've seen, there were many buildings that went with that property because it was a farm, but it didn't make any sense to have all of them buildings with just their homestead. So some of the property lines are not 50 feet where it would ideally be. And they did it with an eye towards maintaining as much tillable land as they can. That one down by the chicken coop there, that would have made no sense really I mean, I suppose legally they should have went 50 feet out. You could have went 50 feet around there, but you take that much additional property out of the tillable land for so little benefit to them. And it was pretty much like most of them, by mutual agreement, which is best for them, you should have one of these garages, the rest of it goes with the property. And when the buildings were built, they didn't do it with setbacks, so it's inevitable that you're gonna have some of these violations if you want to. And that's pretty much the nature of like I said, I think if they had known this was gonna come up, they certainly would have figured out something to prevent it. But like I said, I looked at the ordinance and I didn't see anything in there that addresses splits and what were the requirements. So, you know, like I said, they did what was mutually beneficial, and they looked at it and said, this is probably makes the most sense to do it this way. You know, like I said, there's no sense in with a chicken coop, say we're gonna have a 50-foot swipe out there out of tillable land. That's little bit, that's valuable for the property owner, but little value to the resident, to the new residents.
Like, Tyler and Ashley, did you build the chicken coop and the run thing there?
Yes.
We did.
Yep.
And I didn't realize when I put it in that it needed to be a setback, because everything is, movable and it's not a permanent structure. But I have no other flat property to put it on my property.
Is that chicken coop like what people with free-range chickens do? You move it once in a while?
No, it's on skids.
But you haven't moved it?
No.
Is-
But,
okay.
I mean, like I said, I would move it, but I have no other level property to put it on.
You can come forward.
I'm Irma Hafner, Tyler's grandmother, Larry's wife. I guess the only thing I'd like to add is I think if you look at Tyler and Ashley, they're a young couple with a growing family that have tried to do everything right. They used a lawyer, they used a surveyor, they talked to the township zoning, which at that time was the appropriate thing to do. And I think if you can allow them to have these variances, they're going to improve the value of the property. It's going to improve the value of the area. They're going to be paying more taxes, which benefits the township and the county. And, you know, I think sometimes it's easy to look back and say, well, yeah, I should have done this. But when you go through all the steps you're told to do, get a survey, use a lawyer, you know, make sure that the people that own it you're getting it from are acting in the best knowledge that they have. I would hate to see them not be able to do this when it seems like they have really tried very, very hard all along to follow the laws as they understood them, as they were explained to them by other people. And I don't know what any other what a landowner can do when you go through those steps and everyone says, yeah, you're good, you're good. You know, I would just encourage you to, you know, give them the variances and allow them to improve the property. And as Larry mentioned, you know, you don't want to take land out of agricultural use. I think that's a Houston County kind of a goal to try to keep land in use. So, you know, if this works for the landowner or for the residents and for the people they bought it from, and I don't see where it really negatively impacts anyone else, I would just like to encourage you to approve it. Thank you.
I have one question for Larry, maybe that you could answer. I'm unfamiliar with the La Crescent County zoning as it was before.
Mm-hmm.
Were all the setbacks the same at the time that this split occurred as like Houston counties are today, or?
Pretty much, yes. But there's nothing in there that says, that addresses the changes. In retrospect, you look back and say, oh yeah, you should have put that fence 50 feet out there. But there's, I don't know if you remember, I have the advantage of having been here. We've had one county supervisor was here for a variance. They didn't realize it. They had the retired county surveyor here. They didn't realize it. So this is an issue that we need to deal with as a group, but that's way beyond here. The point is, it's obvious to look at it in hindsight that, yeah, you should have done that. But I looked at the ordinance specifically, and they did not address anything for splits.
Shall we, you guys, ready to move on, or
Any more, anyone
Is-
else have anything,
there any general discussion you guys wanna have about this site?
anyone else have anything to say?
I'm looking at this and not seeing significant issues with these variances. We've done many of these in the past, and I'm looking at chicken coops and small garages and decks, and this is the kind of thing that we've approved in the past because they've improved property, they weren't the fault of owners, and I guess I'm prepared to move on with this.
Okay,
We have the
My
reading
bigger
of the
concern,
finding.
not with that, but we need to protect the ag land. That's a very critical habitat, and I think this 50-foot setback when you're up to a ag land is excessive. That's just my feeling of it, so I really would rather protect the ag land than worry about that setback. And you don't always guarantee that it's gonna be relatives owning the property on that setback. So I think we need to be careful about, put more emphasis on saving our ag land.
And just one last thing, I mean, we have no intentions of moving. I mean, we want to live here.
Yep.
We enjoy living next to Tyler's parents. Our children love it. We have a great quality of life out there with our chickens and our big garden, and, we're not in it to up and sell it after we improve it. We're gonna be there for a long time.
thank you.
Are we ready
Okay.
for findings
Yep,
of,
we-
reading findings of fact?
Yep, we can move on to the findings of fact. Before we go on, though, do we want to approach all these findings as one, or would you like to, or all these, variances as one group of findings?
Are we gonna vote on them individually or as a group? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I think individually, I would say.
I'm okay as a group.
I'm okay with the group.
I am. I'll go with I like the group.
Okay. So just to verify, we're going to approach all these findings as a group. So to begin with, we'll start here with finding number 1. The variance request is in harmony with the intent and purpose of official controls. Staff analysis is that as part of the residential development policies in the comp plan, the county is is to encourage the rehab of existing older homes. 2, as we're going through the findings, if you guys could provide any input, that would be helpful as well. So we'll start with Ken. Ken Anderson.
Yes, I agree with that, my staff analysis.
Okay. Dana?
I agree with the staff analysis.
Brian?
I'm going to say I totally agree with the idea of rehabilitating current properties and of preserving agricultural land. But in point number 3, it says not created by the property owner. Well, obviously, the one at least was created by the property owner, the chicken coop. And I do also believe that we could draw a property line that would alleviate variances not only for this property, but for the parents' property. So I'm going to say no.
Okay. And Ken Visker?
Yes.
Okay. Number 2, there are practical difficulties in complying with the official controls, and the proposed use of the property is reasonable. Economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties. Staff analysis says the garage and woodshed date back to 1968 and the house to 1977. The dwelling is small compared to modern standards, and property slopes and site characteristics make expansion difficult in any direction. The area around the proposed addition has slopes reasonable for building. an addition as shown in the figure below. The same is true for the area occupied by the chicken coop, which is a portable building. All other ideal locations also fall within setback areas. Start with Ken Anderson again.
Yes, I agree with staff analysis.
Dana?
Yeah, I agree with it, just because of the size of the property and the shapes.
Brian?
I agree. I misunderstood, I'm sorry. I thought we were doing these all at once. I thought that's what the vote was, so I went on all the way through all
Oh.
6 of them. So I would
Oh, I
agree
see.
with point 1 and 2.
I was wondering why you're on 3.
My bad. I misunderstood.
That's okay.
We'll finish this out quick. And Ken
Yes,
Visker.
I agree.
Okay. And then just to kind of go back to change the record, when you said you agree with 1 and 2, you're changing your vote on the finding
On
number
one,
1
yes.
to agree?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to number 3. The variance request is due to special conditions or circumstances unique to the property and not created by the property owner. The applicants purchased the property in 2014, and the property lines were established by the previous owners at that time. The property lines currently allow the tillable acreage and larger outbuildings to stay with the parent parcel in order to be utilized by the original landowner. Note again that this was a single parcel at one point, so building proximity does not allow property line setbacks to be met when split into multiple parcels. Furthermore, the slope presents a challenge by severely limiting buildable area. Let's start with Dana this time.
Yeah, I agree with staff analysis.
Brian?
No on number 3, for the reason I said, obviously, factually, they did create one of the variances, or needs for the variance.
Ken? Ken Visker?
Yes, I agree. And Ken,
And then Ken Anderson.
Yes, I agree. Staff
Okay.
analysis.
By the end, I should get that. All right, 4, the variance cannot be alleviated by a reasonable method other than a variance and the minimum variance, which would alleviate the practical difficulty as sought. Staff analysis is that relocating buildings would be difficult as the slope alone presents a challenge for this parcel and limits any area that is reasonable for building. Trying to alter property lines would prove difficult as well unless moving in such a way that eliminates the garage from that parcel. Moreover, there are property line setbacks that need to be maintained for SSTS as well, which is located to the west of the house.
What's STS?
Subsurface sewage treatment, your septic system.
gotcha. Okay.
Dana.
Yeah, I agree with staff analysis.
Brian?
No, as I stated before, I think there's a reasonable way to move the property lines there.
Ken Visker.
Yes, I agree.
And Ken Anderson.
Yes, I agree.
So, finding 5. The variance will not alter the essential character of the locality, nor substantially impair property values or the public health, safety, or welfare in the vicinity. Analysis is that improving their home by adding a living area, deck, and garage addition will add value to their home and therefore the neighborhood. The property fits in line with the character of a typical rural residential property. Let's see. Brian?
I agree with the staff analysis.
Ken Visker?
I agree.
Ken Anderson?
I agree with the staff analysis.
And Dana?
I'll agree with staff analysis also.
All right, and finding number 6. The request is not a use variance and shall not have the effect of allowing any use that is not allowed in the zoning district, permit a lower degree of flood protection than the regulatory flood protection elevation, or permit standards lower than those required by state law. Staff analysis is that a dwelling with accessory buildings is a permitted use in the Ag district, and a reduction of property line setbacks is an area variance. There are no mapped flood hazard areas on the property, so any proposed structures will not lessen the degree of flood protection. The DNR hydrologist has reviewed this site for shoreline bluff requirements and determined it is not applicable. Start with Ken Visker.
I agree.
Ken Anderson.
I agree with staff analysis.
Dana.
Yes, I agree.
And Brian.
I agree with staff analysis.
Okay. That is the conclusion of the findings then. I believe we need a motion then to adopt these.
So move.
I'm sorry, Ken Visker said it? Okay.
To approve.
I'll second that motion.
There's a motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion on this motion? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried.
All right, so then we need to entertain a motion to approve or deny the variance. I guess if you're looking for language, we're looking for a motion to grant the variance of 6 feet for a proposed deck, 36 feet for existing garage, a variance of 33 feet for an existing woodshed, and 46 feet for an existing chicken coop. You're welcome to change that too.
Make the motion to approve the variance as requested by the applicants.
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion made, seconded. Any other discussion before we vote?
I'm
Okay.
sorry, who seconded that?
Huh?
Ken?
Ken?
I
Okay.
The Kens did. You can always say the Kens did.
Yeah, okay.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you, gentlemen. And Amelia for all your help.
Do you have any instructions for them?
I don't think so.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
At this time, I'll yield back the chair to Larry Huffman.
Reluctantly.
You did a good job. Who we got next here anyhow? Where's my agenda?
Right on time?
You're in a tight meeting.
Right on, pretty much on time.
Next one would be Kittleson.
No, I don't have mine. Well, there we
You
go.
can use mine.
Okay,
Or did I take
next is variance for driveway requirements to meet this required 33-foot of old road frontage or legally recorded, perpetual access, at least 33 feet wide for an existing driveway. I gotta find my right now.
Please take notice that an application was received from George and Susan Kittleson for a variance of setback requirements on property located in Sheldon Township. A hearing on this application will be held at the Houston County Commissioners Room in Caledonia, Minnesota at 6 p.m. on Thursday, September 26th. Anyone wishing to submit written information regarding this hearing must do so by Tuesday, September 17th. Again, this was advertised on September 11th. Again, the need for this variance stems from a property split. In this case, the property split is no longer creating problems with structure setbacks from the property lines, but when this property was split, it created an access challenge for the smaller lot for which the variance is now sought. Initially, the parent parcel had frontage along Kittleson Road of a quarter mile, the entire quarter boundary. When the homestead was split off of the tillable land within the parent parcel, it was done so with a 20-foot perpetual easement connecting that building site to the township road. The house was then resided in for several years, and only relatively recently, in terms of the history of this homestead, was its return to the ownership of the current applicant. They're seeking this variance as a first step in a process of returning permit eligibility to this parcel for the purposes of constructing perhaps a residence or perhaps some other type of structure. Doing so would require a conditional use permit of some sort, depending on which option they were to choose. Your staff reports have a somewhat detailed history of the splits that have affected this parcel, as well as a way to look at some of the uses that would have perhaps been considered non-conforming. The house at some point arguably may have been eligible for repair or replacement. One could have also argued that no, it would not have been due to the initial split. It has become a moot point, however, because the house has been demolished for, well, many years, well over the requirement for replacement for a non-conforming use.
Was the house demolished by the current owner or not?
I believe so, but we should clarify that when they come forward. It's currently an open quarter. There's no other houses in there. Slopes are gentle to moderate. It's on top of a ridge and not within the vicinity of a bluff setback. There's no water features or mapped wetlands in the area. The soils are class 3 throughout the parcel. However, they are not known to have been previously in production. And it is outside of the nearest feedlot setback. I'll open up to any questions the board might have of the staff report.
We're dealing simply with an easement.
I'm sorry, what?
We're just dealing with an easement.
At this point, it's only that access easement, correct?
Now, there is a pole barn back there. Is that owned by this applicant?
That is not, no.
So that's a separate property?
Separate property, separate parcel, different owner. If you look at the map on page 1, you'll see the subject parcel in this case is highlighted, and then we have the driveway, and if you look closely, you see that that's also outlined in red, indicating that it's a separate parcel. So within that northeast, northwest quarter, we actually have 3 parcels. I believe it's a 2-acre parcel owned by the applicants in this case, highlighted. The road itself is a parcel owned by a separate owner, and then the delta, the remaining area there, is one parcel bifurcated by the road, but under the same ownership.
What, we're looking to accept that as their access, right?
Correct. That access is 20 feet wide. It's described as a 20-foot wide easement.
In place of the 33.
Correct. Our minimum is 33, so they're looking for 13 feet of variance to fulfill the requirements for a buildable lot.
And they have a perpetual easement?
Yes, they do. That should be
It's on the last page.
on the last page there. The last paragraph describes their easement.
And there's one other person that shares this easement as well? Is that what that inferred?
At least, yes. I guess I don't know if it's limited to one. I believe there may be multiple parcels further to the west that are accessed off this, but that wasn't researched for this
Okay,
report.
and I don't know that it makes a lot of difference, but just could be a busy, and the owner doesn't want to give him 33. Is this the one we went through before?
As I understand it, 33 or additional easement has been requested, but they're unable to obtain it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There's no way they can be compelled to do that.
No.
That we know of anyhow.
There are some
I mean, I
state
guess,
statutes related to
you
this,
get to
but
the issue of it's how long and I know that's not our issue, but there's, you know, fire trucks, emergency vehicles needing, and, I mean, that's always an issue. So I guess we'll have to ask them, they've exhausted all other opportunities, or,
Yes, and in previous, we've had one recent application in this same area recently, and I guess they would come to the board to determine whether, initiating some sort of legal action to compel a wider easement is more reasonable than the variance. That's part of what you'll need to do when you work through those findings.
Are the petitioners here?
Yes.
yeah. Do the applicants have any comments? Could you step forward, please? Do you have any information that we should be aware of? I guess, you know,
Aaron explained it all fairly well. I'm David Agadall,
okay,
and I'm speaking for George and Sue.
okay.
And we have the power of attorney, I think we probably have that in there. We exhausted everything that we could, and it's, there's two parcels on the side of the road owned by an individual, and Barton Hines actually owns the road that goes back to his property that exceeds at the very end of this pathway or 20-foot easement that we have. And we've exhausted all our things. They didn't want to give us the easement on it. So this is our last avenue that we can go through just to get and I don't know if this has been tested in court. I guess the only one that I'm aware of is when I talked to Mr. Burns back here that Ray Klinsky's had the same problem out there. They had a 16-foot easement. They went through the same process we're going through. So I guess if you have any other questions, I'll sure try to answer them.
So this Heinz Barton, that or whatever, he has property beyond
Yes,
there?
that
And
was
so
his
this is a
access
common
road.
easement.
That's his access road to get to his property. He actually owns the road. That's
He owns the road, okay.
Yeah.
And that's how wide?
That's 20 foot. This is.
That's a
Okay,
20-foot
that's-
easement.
Yeah.
So it's a 20-foot easement serving two properties.
Well,
20-foot easement just to his property,
Yeah.
and we have 20-foot easement to George's property, because the bank got that when they had it foreclosed on. So I don't know if the homeowner on each side of the road has an easement or not.
the person who owns the Barton Heinz, that's not an easement. He owns it outright.
He
And then
owns
there's-
that outright.
Correct.
He owns a
And
20-foot.
George has talked to him, and we don't have any problem. George's grandfather used it for, well, turn of the century, so.
Does anybody foresee a potential problem here with that person who owns the road could deny entry? So if you build a house
We
back
have an
there,
easement
They have
from
an
him,
easement.
though. We
They have an
that
easement from Barton.
You have that
This parcel
right to use that.
has an
use that
easement
right
from
away.
We have that
Barton
easement. That's
goes
That's
out
part of his
to use that road.
All the
property
way up to
title.
George's property, we have the.
Yep.
And we're looking to accept that in lieu of a 33-foot.
Right.
Yeah.
So you
all we
can
need is
build.
So
6
the guy who
feet on
owns
each
the
side of
road
so
has
we can
given
drive in.
them an
And we weren't aware of that till I went through the conditional use permit and the building permit, and then Aaron told us that we need that 6.5 feet, and we've been going on for 6 months trying to make that work.
And I bet you're sick of it.
Oh. That would be
Yeah, I
a
got another word
headache.
for it, but. So,
Yeah, we appreciate your,
Oh.
yeah.
Have you talked to the township about the road and whether,
I called, I think her name is Patsy Witsy, and she's on the Sheldon Township Board, and she said she would notify anybody of the township commissioners down there, and they had any questions, and we didn't have any questions. They didn't have any
in
questions.
terms of access, did you ask the question in terms of access for emergency vehicles and that sort of thing?
Did I ask her?
No, any of the township people who would make those decisions?
Yeah, I asked them if they had any reason that we couldn't go through with this application, and she said if they had any questions that they would call me or Aaron, and I have never got any call back on it.
And she understood that it was gonna be a 20-foot,
Yes, she did. I
Road.
explained the whole thing to her.
okay.
Aaron gave me her number, and I called her right the same day, and she said she would notify the township board down there, and called her, and she said if they have any questions, they'll call you. And I explained the whole situation just like I did to you.
What is it, gravel?
It's gravel, but it's
Yeah.
not much gravel. It needs a little TLC, so.
So what
But it's
the,
gravel all the way back from the highway at the Ridge Road. It's the
Yeah.
same kind of deal, you know, all the way back. It's all gravel all the way back there. But take 5 miles of gravel to get to it, you know, because it's just a regular township road, so,
is the township roads gravel?
yes.
Oh, yeah. Which one's ours?
Who's gonna maintain it? I mean, it's gonna be plowed.
Actually, it's probably up to Barton. I&T owns it,
Yeah,
but I'm sure George will have to, if he's gonna live back there, a couple loads of gravel will go a long way.
and plow it as well. How long is
It's
it?
easier to maintain it and it's easier on your vehicles.
Oh, yeah.
Easy, and it almost has to be maintained if any property owner has a building back there, so if you have to get back there for a fire truck or rescue or something, you can get back there.
Yeah, yeah. Is it pretty flat?
It is, it's right on top of the ridge, it's flat.
But I mean, the road isn't built up.
The road is
so,
flat, it's not
I mean,
humped
if
up
you
or
go off to
anything.
the
It's
side
right
a
in the
little
middle
bit.
of the field, goes right straight back, yeah.
Okay,
And it's
yeah.
built up some too, it's not level with the.
One question I have, and I don't know the answer to this, but like right now, for example, in my area, they're putting in this fiber optic cable. And if you build back there, I'm assuming at some point somebody's gonna want internet access. Can you bury a cable on an easement? I don't know the answer to that, but it's a potential problem.
I think when they install that fiber optic, they can just use the eminent domain and go wherever they want, can't they?
Do you know the answer to that, Aaron?
I don't. I'm just rereading the easement language here, and it doesn't specify, what this easement is for at all. Sometimes they say for
Their adjoining
certain
property
purposes.
owners had the electrical go right across through there, so, right through their property already.
Can we interrupt here, or do we wanna wait a minute? Go ahead, what do you got?
You talking to us?
No, sorry.
Tell you, boys, I can't hear worth a cent. But I think you're talking about this setback of this road back that George Kittleson
Yeah.
and Susan Kittleson, they wanna have, is it the road set back?
It's the width of the road. It should be 33 feet wide, and they've only got a 20-foot easement.
let's get on our microphones. if
It's a 30, here, can you hear this? Am I on here?
Yeah.
It needs to be a 33 feet, but they got 20.
Okay, now.
So they're saying, can we've exhausted everything, can we get by with 20?
I understand. Well, how wide is the actual road right-of-way supposed to be anyway?
33 feet.
33 feet. How wide is a township road supposed to be?
What is it, 60?
commonly 66.
66.
Commonly 66 feet. But this isn't a public road, though. This is a private easement.
Now, well, I own half of that road going back into the Kale Farm, and Rolf, Jory, and Walter Harms, they own the other half. See? Now,
Is
as
that
far
you?
as I am concerned,
Who is-
What's your name?
George Kittleson and Mr. Breyer, they will always have a right to go in. I own half of it. But now, there's something else that I don't understand. The last 2 years now, when I pay my taxes, they have taken the taxes off of this road right away. I've paid them for 60 years. Somebody must be trying to stir up a stink to close that road going back in there. I don't understand it.
What is your name?
Barton Heinz.
Okay.
You say
I
you,
own the Lawrence Kale Farm. It's right behind Susan and David Breyer's farm. Al Huseman used to own it a few years ago. And Walter Harms and Rolf Jory, they owned the old Sam Peterson place that Schultz Farms had back there. They've also got a half interest in that road right away. Now, whether they're paying tax on their half of the road, I don't know.
well, the taxes are, you're in the wrong committee for taxes.
This board doesn't deal with taxes. He's saying, we could certainly look into that for you, but these gentlemen would not know.
Well, on this road right away, are they trying to that I can't get back to the Kale farm, is that? what's
No.
going
No,
on?
no, they wanna be able to build back there, all right?
Okay.
And
I
our
understand.
ordinance says 33 feet,
Okay,
and they've only got 20, and they're saying, will you let us build with just 20 feet? That's all they're looking for tonight. They're just saying, the ordinance says you gotta have 33 feet, you got it? But they only have 20, and they're saying, can you give us a variance so we can build with just 20 feet? They're not trying to close it.
well, do they take off of the road then for widening the 33 feet?
No, we're trying to decide if we're saying, you can build with just 20. We're gonna say we'd like to have 33, but if you can get 20, maybe that's all you can get.
The easement won't change at all. The easement stays just the way it is. All they're asking for is permission.
I would never fight with these boys that
Yeah.
are driving back into this. They've got a right of way
Yeah,
back
no.
there all the time.
The easement-
All the time. I get along with them.
Sure, the easement will not change. The easement will remain the same.
But what I came up here tonight for was to find out if this 33 feet wide is going to be like infringing on the road right away?
The easement won't
No,
change,
no,
It'll-
no.
it will stay 20
can't
feet.
hear you.
The easement will stay 20 feet. It won't expand to 33 feet. It will stay at 20. They're just asking for permission to use just 20 feet instead of the standard 33, and that's what they're asking us. So the easement won't stay, it won't change, it'll stay the same.
It's kinda like
As long
buying,
as I can get back to the Kale farm.
You got it. You're gonna get there.
That's all I feel.
Okay,
Well, thanks a lot.
you bet.
I know you're doing.
So, did you guys tear down the house that was there?
Yeah, we had the fire department come out and practice on it.
It was George's great-grandfather's house, and we initially, when we bought the place, thought maybe we could restore it. That was our hope.
But it was too far
It was
gone.
really, really too far gone. Not restorative.
When you checked into expanding this easement, how did you go about that? I mean, did you offer to buy land on either side of it and pay a reasonable price and so on, or
No.
what?
No, we didn't offer to, I mean,
that,
I guess I didn't think that was ever an option, or, I mean,
So you didn't really check?
what we, I can answer that. What we really did was, we went, Susan and Dave Byer, and had it all wrote up by a lawyer to get the easement. And initially, they were gonna sign it, and then they said they wouldn't sign it because it would damage their property. And I know Dave has offered to buy the land, the 2 acres from George. So, but all we asked him was just so that we could drive back there on that road that Barton owns, you know, at 6.5 feet. If we'd have done it, I think Aaron said 3-4 years ago, we wouldn't have had this problem. But, or left the house stand because you could rehabilitate the house. But, and then afterwards, they said it would, they had, for their reasons, they didn't want us to build back there. So that's kind of where we're at, that's why we're here. But we've exhausted all our things, so.
I think they're holding out, 'cause they don't want to build.
But they haven't explored the option.
Do we have any, where were we at? Ask comments, applicants, questions? Would it be appropriate to see if there's anybody else that has information that would be willing to share about this point?
I had one more question. It says there's an old well back there. Is that a usable well, or you? or
no,
not?
we put in
They
a
put in a
new,
new well.
we put in a new well,
You've got electricity back there, huh?
correct.
So there's only one well, and that's the one you just did?
We sold half the well to Mr. Breyer. He asked us if we would sell and share the well with him, and we said yes. That was about maybe 4 years ago.
3 years.
He has a home back there.
It's a dwelling, I think. That's the full by well, I think it is, I'm not sure.
I think what we want to apply for is whatever the conditional use will permit when we apply for that, what we can apply for. And Aaron said he would bring us up to date on that, what we can apply for.
if they wish to apply for a dwelling, that would be a dwelling on less than 40 acres, so that would be a conditional use. In the ag district, all other uses beyond houses or ag buildings are accessory, meaning they'd have to be accessory to a principal dwelling, which would usually, principal building, which is most commonly a dwelling. So without a dwelling on there, their only option for a permitted use would be an ag building. And given the size of the parcel and the way that they use it, it's unlikely, not impossible, that they would meet that criteria for an ag building. So if they wish to build a shed for some purpose other than ag, that would likely come as a conditional use request as well. Other questions on that? I guess I'm seeing expressions that.
Well, I'm thinking we need to open it up to members of the public, or not.
Yep.
Sure.
So is a dwelling gonna be built back there or not, whether that dwelling looks like a pole barn or a standard house? Is it a dwelling?
Well, we don't dictate what a dwelling looks like here, so really from
That's
the
what
zone.
I'm asking, is it a dwelling or not?
Right, so they haven't decided, I guess,
We
from,
can't until we find out, we gotta get through this first.
they would
We have
need,
to get through the Board of Adjustments, and then Aaron says we have to go before the conditional use permit, either put in for a residential household, which will be, or else, a pole building, you know, with a bathroom in it without a shower, of course, and whatever the conditional use permit will allow us to have.
access would be required for either option. So if they chose to apply for any type of structure and they call it a dwelling, we don't dictate what that needs to look like aesthetically. Our requirements are that you put in compliant wastewater treatment, and you can call, I mean, you can look however you want as long as you have a way to treat your wastewater. But if they wish to put in a shed and not permitted as a dwelling, it would likely come as a conditional use or interim use application, because the only thing that would be a permitted use would be an ag building, and that's only a 2-acre parcel with no commercial ag occurring on it currently. So for instance, if they wanted to build a storage shed, those are typically built as an accessory building, accessory to a house. They don't have a house. Our ordinance says that the principal building is placed before the accessory buildings, except that in the ag district you can build an ag building that can be a principal building.
Is this intended, excuse me, intended to be a residence where you're gonna live there? Or is it a extra acreage that you wanna?
Initially, I don't think mostly we intend to just go out there and spend some time with our kids and grandkids, because we live in Caledonia and it's too accessible.
Okay, yeah. And, I mean, you're not intending to build a house out there and live there? Not that it makes any difference.
Yeah, it shouldn't change the
No.
calculation
Just
much.
to get a sense of what's going on.
Well, I'd have to say, you know, ideally, I think we would like to build some kind of a metal shed or something with a nice big garage, and then something that if we wanted to spend the night out there, we could.
Yeah,
Well,
and you
we
got
wouldn't stay out there in the
four-wheelers and
wintertime, for sure.
you want something to put them in and lock the door.
Yeah.
I think if we grant this easement or this variance, we can't anticipate what's gonna happen out
No.
there. I mean, it could
We
be a
don't.
resident, it could be
Yeah.
a number of things, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, if you had reasons for limiting it, you certainly would have the authority to do that, provided there are reasons with a tie to the request. But you have no obligation to put those types of limits on it unless you wish to. You could put conditions on a variance as long as there's a connection to the request.
I would like to hear from members of the public here. Is anybody interested in providing information? Could you step up to the microphone, speak up?
Do you folks want to maybe take a seat and come back up afterwards?
Yeah, I'm Dave Breyer from La Crescent. We own the 78 acres around George's land. First of all, I want to make it clear, George is a very nice person, don't get me wrong. But we do worry about the effect of the property value around our place, and we bought it with the anticipation of hunting land, plus we rented out for ag. But we did build a shabin, or a shed, with living quarters, and now we're building a accessory building as far as a storage shed right behind where George wants to build. Our concern is pretty much property value, you know, how it's gonna affect our property and the privacy that we have, because he's basically an island right in the middle of our property.
Why do you think it would lower the property value? Could you explain that?
I've talked to realtors, and they all told me the same thing. It would affect them because of the lack of privacy.
That parcel was there when you purchased.
It was there. It was. That's another story in itself. I had a verbal agreement with a banker to buy it, and then it was during the holidays, and then they got another offer, and I didn't counter.
Or you have property just beyond, is that served by that same variance, road easement or your shed?
Yeah, we use the
You use that same road
right.
easement?
In fact, we do a lot of the maintenance on that road. We've hauled gravel onto it. We've maintained it pretty heavily lately.
How long is it? Distance, 200 feet?
Oh, it's longer than that.
Okay.
mile.
Yeah.
Huh?
Quarter mile.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it takes some maintenance.
Takes a lot of maintenance. Yeah.
Any other questions? Anybody else from the public? Or do you have any questions of Mr. Breyer? Anybody else from the public that's interested in sharing? Any more information you would like us to have?
Just a question for you. You're using that road easement that Barton Hines owns
Mm-hmm.
to get to your,
It's called a cart path. Yes.
yeah. Even though you have land access to the public road.
We had an agreement when we built out there to use that.
Okay. Thank you.
The agreement you have, is that for a 33-foot wide road?
I have no idea. We own the land around it, so I'm not that concerned.
But you don't own that road. Barton
No,
does.
Barton does.
And you don't know what the width of your agreement
I
is?
guess I didn't measure it. You know,
Do you have something legal?
well, it's
I guess I didn't research legal
I mean,
easements
we've
for
been
Mr.
there
Breyer.
I built that building 5 years ago, probably now. We owned the land for quite a while.
Yes?
I kind of researched it. George has access that's registered at the courthouse. I don't know if Dave has access to get back to it. It's registered. I haven't seen anything registered at the courthouse because he owns land on both sides of the road. He could put his own road in. He's
Yep.
driving on Barton Road now.
Barton just said when he was here I had access.
Yeah, but you can verbally.
And
Yeah.
I've also done the maintenance.
Okay.
Verbal agreement.
If he doesn't have
Well, wait,
if he
we
doesn't have
we
comments,
just
then
gotta,
it's,
what's that?
if he has no more comments. we can move
Yeah,
on.
I think, unless you have any more comments, you can, and we'll move on. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any more questions by the Board of Adjustment members of any of the, do you have any, do the owner, the partitioners with that information have any more, response to it or any more information that we should have?
No, I guess we laid out all the facts that we had, and Dave just laid out what he thought would hurt them. I mean, this road has been used by his granddad, and he talked to Barton, he says he's happy to let us post drive back there. He could shut the road off if he wanted to legally, he owns the road.
Well, not if you got an easement.
No, yeah, but George has an easement at the courthouse. The verbal agreement, you know, we were just heard Barton and say, yeah, you can drive back there, but you know how that would stand up in court?
Could I ask you to come back up? I have a couple questions if you don't mind.
And it's not a full quarter mile to George's either. It's
No, it might be to his property.
700
Yeah.
feet to George's, maybe an eighth a mile to George's.
What year, when did you acquire the property, George?
I think it was 8 years ago, but I'm not positive.
Could you describe any buildings that were on that property at that point in time?
Well, at that time, it was just a house, and there is a little barn there, a little shed, and a garage. And like I say, unfortunately, the house was in too rough a shape to do any work on it, so that's when we elected to.
What, do you have an opinion on the effect of buildings in the state that they were in when you purchased that property might have on adjoining property values?
You know what, when we bought that place, I had no idea who owned anything around us. We were just interested because it was my grandpa, and had lived there when I was a kid, and we thought it'd be great to have the old homestead back.
Okay. And I guess lastly, I'm just trying to balance out the, or get a better handle, get some more information in terms of assessing effects on property values.
I have something to add to that.
Yeah, let me ask this last question, and then maybe you could pop in. But I guess I'm looking at, and again, I'm not a realtor, so I'm just looking for opinions, and we have an opinion already that was presented to the board. But based on what you're looking to do in terms of building there, how would that contrast with the conditions of the buildings when you purchased the property in terms of affecting neighboring property values?
Can I answer that, George?
If that's all right. Yeah.
Sure.
They have a broken down house there, a shed that's falling down, and he's gonna clean that all up. Leaving that sit there, you think that would lower the property value better than a nice building or a nice residential structure?
That's what I'm asking. Yeah, I guess I don't know.
How can a realtor, without even, how can a realtor say that a taxable piece of property is better than what George got there, where it's just 2 acres of land with a bunch of junk buildings on it that he wants to clean up and put a nice building out there? You'd think it would help the property value if somebody came to buy it, instead of looking at that pile of junk there that he has around and had a nice structure on it. And something that would go on the property taxes rather than 2 acres of ag land.
Sure.
When
Can you
we
speak
bought
in
the
the
property.
microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know how to do this. Okay. When we bought the property, we were told by Mr. Scanlon that we could build out there because there was already a house there. Can you hear me? You can't hear me. I'll just talk loud.
No, we'll add it for the recording.
Okay. Don't put it right by my mouth. Okay.
There you go. Good.
Mr. Scanlon said that we would be able to build there because there was already a house there. And so that's why we put in a well. And we haven't, up to this point, 5 years later, we haven't been able to use our well. I mean, Mr. Breyer is using the well because he bought half of it. And we want to be good neighbors. We don't want to be arguing and scrapping with our neighbors. That's not how we operate. But it just seems like we have this 2 acres now, and when we bought it, we thought we would be able to build on it. That's what our understanding was. And so now to just sit with this 2 acres with a new well out there, and it's just kind of crazy, it just doesn't make any sense. And we do want to be good neighbors. We're not going to, I can understand Mr. Breyer's concern, but I do agree that a nice looking building there is much, that's much nicer. And I think Mr. Breyer would ultimately kind of like to buy that 2 acres, and he was kind of disappointed that he wasn't able to buy it, and I understand that. But that's the way things go. It's water under the bridge. It's done now. You didn't get the 2 acres, so let's move on. That's my thought.
All right, thank you.
If you were to widen out that road, would you have to buy the additional land from Mr. Breyer?
Why would you widen the road? It's an access. Been there for 85 years.
Because it's 20 feet wide and it's supposed to be 33
It's
feet.
20 feet.
I don't think Mr. Breyer would be interested in selling us any land. I'm not sure, but
If you want to give us an easement, I don't think you'd want to sell us any land.
That would be a lot more paperwork probably than what we're going through already. to get
He would like to
6.5
buy the
feet from
land
inside.
from George.
Okay, I'm just asking, I'm trying to understand
Yeah.
here.
Well, if I might add, the property that George bought, he bought from the bank, it was in foreclosure, it was held by a mortgage company. He put a bid on it, he didn't know if anybody else bid on it.
We had no
and he got
idea.
it. So,
We put in one bid and we got it. We had no idea anybody else was even bidding on it or nothing. And all we just found out Mr. Breyer said he wasn't gonna be a good neighbor.
I mean, if that was in access for 85 years, and it's a 20-foot road.
Yeah.
And
And
Dave-
4 years ago, we could have built on it, they just changed the rules,
Yeah, when-
they changed the variance
Bob
of the
Scanlon
amount that
was
you
out
need.
there, they could've
So
done
when
it.
Bob said that they could, at that point, we could have built one out there. But now, 5 years later, they changed the amount of road width that you need. So then the homeowner suffers, landowner suffers because they changed the rule.
Any more questions?
I just want to just correct that point a little bit. 5 years ago, the access requirement was 150 feet of owned frontage. Now the access requirement is 33 feet of owned or easement, so it's much looser than it was.
But if there was a structure there at the time, he could have remodeled that structure.
Yeah, then why did Bob say they could have built a house?
I can't answer that question, but I can tell you 5 years ago, the access requirement was 150
Actually,
feet.
Bob came out and looked at it, told him where he could build it. But
Yeah, he was in charge of zoning back then, so you'd think that he would know what they could build.
Any more questions? Any more general discussion here? Not hearing any. I believe it's time to review the findings.
You folks can take a seat if you like. You don't have to stay up there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Grant or denial of a variance requires that the board make 6 findings. I'll read each finding and provide a staff analysis. I'll then read each of your names and ask for a yes or no vote on that finding. And I will also ask for any rationale you have to support your vote. If you agree with the staff analysis, you can simply say as much. If you have additional things to comment beyond that, you can also say as much. And if you agree with another member's rationale, you can also simply say that. Finding number 1, the variance request is in harmony with the intent and purpose of official controls. Staff analysis is that Section 506 sub 2 of the comprehensive plan encourages the rehabilitation of existing older homes. The application of this policy to a homestead is appropriate insofar as it provides that new buildings be located on existing home sites rather than undisturbed areas. The board must find that a goal of the official controls to resume use of an existing site outweighs the strict adherence to the setback, or in this case, to the access standards. Ken Anderson?
Yes, I more or less agree with this staff analysis. I think the existing site is adequate to meet those requirements.
Larry Hafner?
I agree with staff analysis.
Dana?
I agree with staff analysis.
Brian?
I agree with the idea of rehabilitating older building sites.
And Ken Visker?
I agree. The idea of siting homes on, or areas that had were already there makes sense to me, and this this just seems to be a proper way to encourage homeowners.
Number 2, that there are practical difficulties in complying with the official controls, and the proposed use of the property is reasonable. Economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties. The analysis is that the applicant indicates he attempted and was unsuccessful in acquiring additional easement with, resulting in a variance being his only avenue to building eligibility. And I guess I'll add to that the comments that you heard both from the public and from the applicant tonight. Larry?
I agree with staff analysis.
Dana?
I agree with staff analysis.
Brian?
I don't know, I'm struggling. I don't know if a sincere effort was made to expand that. I guess I'm gonna say no.
Ken Visker?
I agree.
And Ken Anderson?
Yes, I think that easement has been that size for almost enough to be grandfathered in, that I don't think we have to be that concerned about it.
Number 3, the variance request is due to special conditions or circumstances unique to the property and not created by the property owner. The analysis in this case is the current parcel access was established in 1972. The board may find that the county's lack of review of parcel splits created a special circumstance whereby property owners were unknowingly creating non-conforming situations. Dana?
I agree with staff analysis.
Brian?
Find myself struggling again, and here's why. We heard tonight that this same situation was dealt with a couple of months ago on a different access. It was only 16 feet, and so that was part of their reason for coming now, to think that this access would be okay. And are we creating a precedent here in which something less than an acceptable access to property, or less than the ordinance requirement, becomes the standard because we just approve these things?
I guess I would advise you that the board is not bound by precedents you create by previous
I
decisions.
understand that,
And
but
there's,
we, by our very actions, are creating a precedent, whether that's our intent or not.
I think there is value in consistently applying, the standards that you're charged with application of.
I'm going to say no.
Reason being?
That I think we're creating a precedent by our actions. That's inappropriate.
Ken Visker?
I agree.
Ken Anderson?
I agree with staff analysis.
Larry?
I agree with staff analysis. This parcel and the access has been there since 72. So I there is some history there.
Number 4, the variance cannot be alleviated by a reasonable method other than a variance, and the minimum variance which would alleviate the practical difficulty is sought. The applicant indicates he attempted and was unsuccessful in acquiring additional easement width, resulting in a variance being his only avenue to building eligibility. 13 feet is the minimum reduction to access requirements needed to meet current standards. Brian?
What was an actual request made of the landowner to expand that variance, or at that access point?
I think the discussion is over, right?
What's,
It's up to you. You can allow it.
Yeah, the discussion is over now.
okay, my understanding was that it was not, so I'm going to say no.
Ken Visker?
I agree. I'm I'm confident that the 20-foot roadway is acceptable and has been working for a lot of people at this point, and so I'm comfortable with that.
Ken Anderson?
I agree. To my perception, it appears that the road easement is owned by one person and the adjacent land by another person. And these parties are a third party to that. And it's very difficult to get that accommodated any other way.
Larry?
Yes, and I agree with Ken Anderson. And the staff analysis.
And Dana?
Yes, I agree with staff analysis.
Number 5, the variance will not alter the essential character of the locality nor substantially impair property values or the public health, safety, or welfare in the vicinity. And I guess I would ask that you specifically touch on your thoughts on property values, as that was raised tonight when you respond. The staff analysis in this case is that the variance request is made in the furtherance of a goal to build a dwelling or other structure which would require a CUP. Similar structures are commonplace throughout the Ag District. The elimination of dilapidated buildings and the construction of modern buildings is likely to have a positive aesthetic effect and not anticipated to impair neighboring property values. Ken Visker.
I have some experience in this, and I'm not convinced that property values will be impaired with newer structures, and it's hard to say that until you see what's being built, but some of this has to do with privacy, and I think we can't legislate that. We need to look at it in terms of improving the property as opposed to property values going down.
And a yes or no?
That's a yes. I'm sorry.
Ken Anderson.
Yes, it isn't adding a new building site into an remote area or anything like this. This was an existing building site, so I don't think it changes the property values.
Larry?
Yes, I agree. I guess I agree with staff analysis, and I've built a couple of houses in rural areas, and boy, I sure didn't want anybody to build a house across the street from me. That was nice to see them poplars over there, but they have as much right to build as I did. I don't know how you put that in there.
Well, I guess you're saying that's not going to change the essential character or affect property values, health, safety, welfare, though.
Yes.
Dana?
Yes, I agree with staff analysis. I don't see how removing old dilapidated buildings would devalue adjoining properties.
Brian?
I would vote yes, and the reason is that it may decrease the value of the neighbor's property, but it's obviously going to increase the value of this property, so it's probably a wash or a net gain overall.
In terms of looking at it from a perspective of the vicinity.
Yes.
Yeah. Number 6, the request is not a use variance and shall not have the effect of allowing any use that is not allowed in the zoning district, permit a lower degree of flood protection than the regulatory flood protection elevation, or permit standards lower than those required by state law. The staff analysis is the request is for an area variance, and there are no mapped floodplain areas on the property. I can't remember who I'm on. Ken Visker?
I agree.
Oh, okay. Ken Anderson?
I agree with staff analysis.
Larry?
I agree with staff analysis.
Dana?
Yes, I agree.
Brian?
Agree with staff analysis, yes.
Okay, we've concluded the 6 findings required, each passing. I would look for a motion to accept the findings that were just created.
Make the motion to accept the findings.
I'll second it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Motion has been, we have a motion and second to approve the findings. All in favor say aye. Or wait, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Should the board elect to grant the variance request, staff does not recommend any conditions. There was some conversation earlier about could you limit the type of structure. My guidance to you is yes, you could, but you'd have to provide a reason for doing it.
I don't think well, are there any recommendations? I think
I don't-
not. Do you
No.
want-
I don't want to put limitations.
I don't either. Do you want to read the motion then?
I would propose language to grant a variance of 13 feet to meet the required 33-foot recorded perpetual easement access from an existing public roadway.
I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion as the recommended.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to accept the easement as presented. All in favor, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Yeah.
It took a while.
The other side of that is if we right, otherwise we can't start it if we get done early. Or, after this one, we'll be at it now with the Board of Adjustment, won't we?
What's that?
I was gonna say, after this next one, we should take a break, but we'll be switching over.
Probably, yeah. Okay. Next up is Stuart Owens and Jeff Beckman, Money Creek Township, variance to allow a dwelling on a buildable area less than .90 acres in size. Step forward, please. Get the right paper here. All right.
Please take notice that an application was received from Stuart Owens, with Jeffrey Beckman being the co-applicant, for a variance of setback requirements on property located in Money Creek Township. A hearing on this application will be held at the Houston County Commissioners Room in Caledonia at 6:30 on September 26th. Anyone wishing to submit written information regarding this hearing must do so by Tuesday, September 17th, and this was again advertised on September 11th. This is another instance where we have an older homestead that's gone into some degree of disrepair, and where we have a new party interested in rebuilding on that existing site. In this case, it's an area variance. The parcel in question here has a township road running through what I would call the flatter portions of it that are not located in the floodplain, and that results in a limited building envelope on in both locations. They're somewhat close to the required .9 acres if you don't account for any setbacks or right-of-way distance, and the ordinance is unclear as to whether, I guess the ordinance doesn't require that you account for that, I should say. I understand the purpose of this area requirement to be to ensure that there's adequate space for sewage or wastewater treatment, and other buildings commonly found in an ag building, which all have setbacks from one another. Therefore, I've requested that they go through this application, even though they were fairly close as we measured it. Again, this is the first step in a two-hearing approach that would be required to build a home. In this case, it would also require a CUP. This site has many older buildings on it currently. The applicant has indicated that they propose to remove many of the older buildings, and they would be replacing them with far fewer, I think just one newer building. Is that correct? One new house, and they would keep one of the older buildings that's in better condition than the rest. Again, the house has been abandoned since sometime in the mid-2000s. It's clearly been abandoned longer than any property right would maintain should it be a non-conforming use. The parcel itself is 34 acres. The township road extends right through it. It separates the existing house from the outbuildings. They have had a septic professional on site who has identified 2 suitable locations for a type 1 drain field that would work with the proposed location for the new house. They are adjacent to floodplain, but they are considerably higher than the base flood elevation, I believe by more than 50 feet. It's an open quarter, and also they are beyond any setback requirement, quarry, feedlot that might restrict the building. So as best as zoning is aware that the proposed location would meet the requirements should the variance be granted and the CUP be granted. I would open up to any questions you have on the staff report.
Is this a split from another piece of property, or?
They're not proposing to split it right now, but it was a split. Actually, I'm not sure.
I mean, 0.9 acres doesn't sound like, that's what I see right there.
Yeah, let me clarify.
That's why.
The parcel's not 0.9 acres, but
Okay.
the buildable envelope within that would be,
Okay,
the
okay.
parcel is 34 acres.
Okay, so you're really close to the 40 acre requirement.
Yeah, we're at 34. If you look at,
Yep.
I might have these graphics in, page 4 has the entire parcel with the contours shown on it, and it is it's a peculiar shaped parcel from what you're accustomed to. And then that building area is shown on page 3 has got 2, and those are just drawings based on our site visits when we identified the building envelope. It's essentially where the hill drops off to the road.
So the parcel below that hill from the road down toward the river you still own that also?
Correct.
Cropland.
Correct.
It looks like on the one picture, figure 2 that I see, like you're proposing the building site, and then there's a grove of trees, and then cropland below that.
Correct.
You own all of that?
Yep.
Okay. It just didn't look right at first. Thank you.
Any information that you wish to that I left out or should have mentioned, or you want to add in any way?
Well, I'm here with Stuart at the time because I'm Marlon Peterson. I sell real estate, of course, and this property was advertised as a buildable site. I did not have it listed for sale. The other realtor had it listed as a buildable site. I identified quickly that it's not a buildable site unless I sit down with Aaron and we go through the process in which we're going through here tonight. And it's because of the 34 acres. And so what we did is we had a septic installer, Chance Nelson, came out to the property and did indicate, after Stewart had indicated to him where his structure, his house, would be built, then it had to be determined where would the septic fall in line and where is the backup position for the septic also, which is a regulation of the county. And Chance Nelson was able to do that on the site. Stewart and Lori plan to remove buildings that are there, which I believe is going to be, and they do too, is going to be an improvement along that road. Right now, I was out there actually today, and there were pieces of metal along the ditch that had blown off of the building somewhat. And so this would be an improvement. What I'm going to do, if Mr. Chairman, if I can approach, I have some pictures that are of the site which could benefit you. I wish I had one for each of you, but our computer wasn't cooperating today. So if you want to pass these around, this is first the house on the other side of the road that is actually not livable. I did know the gentleman that lived in it. His name was Paul Broughton at the time, and that house has not been lived in for many, many years, nor can it be lived in. This is one of the buildings on the property, on the side of the road that Stewart and Lori would like to build in. This is the barn.
Is that this one?
This one? I think so, yes. Yeah.
Maybe when you got
This one's
that's the house.
This is the barn.
Okay, that's
Okay. Here it is.
okay. Yeah.
If you reference your this is a page
Back.
provided in the application, but it's in your packets, and it has circled the buildings that they propose to remove. That might be handy to cross-reference with those
That
pictures.
page is much better. That's the barn that would be taken down. And there's just another angle of the road showing the relationship of the side of the road that the house would be built, and that shows the barn and this other shed that would be removed.
Okay.
As you notice, they're,
Almost on the road.
pardon?
They're almost on the road.
Yes.
Awful close to the road.
Yes. As you notice, and through talking with Aaron, it has been indicated we need to be 65 feet from the center of that road, which is the plan. We also need to be 40 feet from the back, which goes down over the edge to that cornfield down below that would be floodplain. And the building that he is planning on erecting would easily fit in that location. So.
Aaron indicated that you were gonna save one building.
Correct. There's a garage on the north side of that road. I have it circled in one of them.
I'm looking at the
one
you've
not
got everything circled on,
Yeah.
on that
No,
side.
there's actually one.
One that is.
Oh, on the north side, oh, okay.
Yeah, on the
right
north
there.
side.
So not on the side you're building, on the other
No,
side?
on the other side.
It's way
Okay,
over
gotcha,
there.
gotcha.
That building's still good.
It's in real good shape.
Okay.
These are,
That's where I was
these are
confused.
shot.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Okay.
The rest is junk.
everybody done with these? I think we
Yeah.
got-
Well, and what you put on there would be part of the permitting process. We're not judging that now.
And
He said that he was explaining the building, what they're gonna put it and where, and that would be part of the permitting process, wouldn't it?
Right, I
Beyond
guess
what-
that's
beyond
just-
what we're doing now.
Correct.
yes, that they
It's an
wouldn't
area
be
variance.
locked into that.
Yes.
Why did you choose not to build on the other side of the road there? It looks like that actually is a little bit bigger of a space.
Actually it isn't. It's only .9.
It's about the same, isn't it, Aaron?
It's
It
pretty.
says .995 for the north side of the road and .812 for the south side of the road.
Part of the reason there, that's a good question, part of the reason there is because you don't have them on your picture. I have another picture of them here, but there are some buildings there that are owned by the neighbor.
Right,
And-
but just that little chimney piece is .995 or
Correct,
something.
correct, but by building on that side, they'd be right next to those buildings, which there would be a setback from those because they're on the neighbor's land. And
Okay.
Well, I'll clarify that. I guess there wouldn't be a setback from the buildings. There might be a preference not to be by them, which is perhaps understandable. In terms of if you're looking on page 3 and you've got those areas, I'd encourage you to look at the word approximate in there, and that those are, you notice my line's not drawn down the middle of the road. They're so close in terms of where we're landing that a slight deviation to where you split them down the road would maybe tip the balance to the other. The northern one has more defined lines. The southern one, in order to make that lower boundary, Pete and I went to the site and tried to walk the edge as best we can. It's fairly overgrown. So again, those are estimates, maybe not survey grade precision in terms of where we're calling that southern boundary. I think it's probably fair to say they're about equal size.
So the actual buildable envelope, so to speak, that's a new term to me, but would be about 20 or 25% less than these acreages because it goes to the middle of the road, and you obviously would have to exclude the right-of-way.
Correct.
Because of setback, correct.
Yeah, the ordinance doesn't state that. In my view, the reason for that building envelope is primarily driven by need for wastewater treatment, which is why I requested that as part of their application, they have that consultation with the septic designer to identify that the site is indeed suitable.
For an original and a backup.
Right, so there's not a requirement for that. If they were creating a new parcel, there would be a requirement for the two, but I think that that's valuable information for the board here to have when they make a decision if it's responsible to allow the building on this smaller area.
One of the big improvements it'll make for that particular area, because that does gently come to a corner after that area, it would get rid of that barn and that shed, which right now are too close to the road, based on the new standards. At the time they were built, I'm sure they weren't, but we don't know. Those buildings are very, very old, so we don't know where that road was and how wide that road was at the time. And then the debris wouldn't end up on the road, as I found today when I was out there. Yeah.
Do we have any more questions of the applicants? Hearing none, it's a question of the board members. Any other board members have questions? Do we have anybody from the general public here that is interested in commenting on this?
Yes, I guess I would like to comment on it.
Could you come up forward and?
Pete, will you guys go down?
Yes.
I would like to comment on it. My name is Dennis Kinsler, and I have land bordering, and my daughter has land bordering this. I own a farm right around it. And my son also has a piece up against it. And we would really like to see this, him allowed to do this, because it would improve the value of the farm. Like they say, they're going to tear down the barn, and they're going to make it look a lot better. Right now, it's kind of a brushy area that's right on my land, not on it, but by my land, by my son's land. So my son owns a house and land right in there, and I own a farm past it. And I guess we would really like to see you agree to this, because I think I used to have a neighbor there all the time. Well, when I first moved in the valley, it was Nelson, and then it was Paul Broughton, and even we had a Munson living on a trailer house by the barn there for a while. And I like that. It's close to my place. And I'm really hoping you would allow him to build there, because he's gonna, he'll create more tax value too, because right now there isn't much there.
Can always do that.
So that's why I guess I would like to see him will be able to do this. This is just my opinion, but I do own land on a lot of around him. So that's my opinion on it, and I think he would be a good neighbor to have, let's put it that way, rather than this bunch of trees and brush and old buildings that sit there now.
Well, we appreciate you stepping forward.
Thank
Oh,
you.
well, I thank you. I've wanted somebody to buy that for quite a while. And somebody finally went ahead and did it, so, okay, that's all I have to say is I'm really hoping you guys would go ahead. Because we are neighbors, also my brother is here, and he owns land right around it, so he's interested in having this done too, to get some of that brush and things cleared up and look a lot nicer in the valley.
Good.
Thank you,
Thank
that's
you.
all I
Thank
have
you.
to say.
Anybody else interested in comments? Thank you. Oh, let's see, where are we at here? Review of the public. Additional questions from the board, members of adjustment?
Which building was the existing house? You had the existing house that was pictured or whatever. Which one of the buildings is it?
I can show you on there.
Yeah, just kind of curious. I imagine it's one of those circled to go down.
Yep, it's that guy right there.
Okay, that's what I was expecting.
That one there we're gonna save.
Yep.
Just the rest is
Indicating the
all junk.
one,
The house has been abandoned probably 20 years.
Across the road.
yeah, he's
That one out
this
there.
guy right here.
That one there.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, or should we move to findings?
Just from, it wouldn't matter on either side of the road, which we'd have to have the variance either way. Am I right?
Yes, as I measure them again.
Because of the size.
It's
The variance
very, very
for the
close.
buildable site would be required either side of the road, and you actually own land on the side you're building on and not much beyond what was the building site on the other side, right?
Correct.
Okay, that makes it easier for me.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, I think we can move on to finding of fact.
Six conditions are required when considering a variance. The board needs to make findings on each condition. I'll read each finding requirement and provide a staff analysis, then I'll read your names and I'd ask for a yes or no vote along with the rationale behind that. Same instructions, I guess, as our previous one, I should just say. Number one, the variance request is in harmony with the intent and purpose of official controls. Larry Hafner. Oh, I'm sorry, the staff analysis is the comprehensive plan sets forth the policy of encouraging the rehabilitation of existing older homes. The BOA may choose to extend this policy to existing farmsteads. Larry Hafner.
I agree with staff analysis. Yes.
Dana?
Yes, I agree with staff analysis.
Brian?
Yes, I agree with rehabilitating the old farmstead.
Ken Visker?
I agree.
Ken Anderson.
I agree.
Number two, there are practical difficulties in complying with the official controls, and the proposed use of the property is reasonable. Economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties. The staff analysis is that the limited area available surrounding the existing farmstead represents a practical difficulty. The proposed site is reasonable in that it is accessible from the road and is on the same side of the road as the majority of the parcel. Dana?
Yes, I agree with staff analysis. Having it on the north side would split up his property and make it impractical for him.
Brian?
I agree.
Ken Visker?
I agree.
Ken Anderson?
I agree with staff analysis.
And Larry?
I agree, but I've got a question.
Sure.
Am I out of order here? Where's the water?
Water meaning,
The well, there's an old well on the south side of the road, but it's been capped. It's no longer good.
Okay, so it's gonna be at wherever you have the house?
Yes, the new well.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. I'm sorry, yes, I
Yes.
agree with staff analysis. Sorry.
Number 3, the variance request is due to special conditions or circumstances unique to the property and not created by the property owner. The fact that the town road runs through the existing farmstead creates challenges in redeveloping the building site. While the history of Perkins Valley Road was not researched in the preparation of this report, the overall layout was established prior to zoning rules and can be found to represent a unique circumstance. Brian.
I agree with your analysis.
Ken Visker.
I agree.
Ken Anderson.
I agree.
Larry.
Yes, I agree with staff analysis.
And Dana.
Yes, I agree.
Number 4, the variance cannot be alleviated by a reasonable method other than a variance, and the minimum variance which would alleviate the practical difficulty is sought. The analysis is that calculating building envelope without including the town road and right-of-way would require a variance for all locations within the existing farmstead. Thus, there are no buildable locations that would not require relief from the board. Ken Visker.
I agree.
Ken Anderson.
I agree with staff analysis.
Larry.
Agree with staff analysis.
Dana.
Yes, I agree.
Brian.
I agree with staff analysis.
Number 5, the variance will not alter the essential character of the locality nor substantially impair property values or the public health, safety, or welfare in the vicinity. Ken Anderson.
I agree with staff analysis.
Oh, I should tell you what staff analysis is.
Well, I read it here, so.
Yep. The analysis in this case is a new dwelling on the site of the existing farmstead will return the neighborhood to the density that existed throughout the 20th century. The applicant has presented plans to remove several dilapidated buildings, which will have a positive effect on the neighborhood, both aesthetically and in terms of property value. All right, Ken Anderson?
Yes, I agree with staff analysis.
Sorry about that. Larry?
Yes, I agree with staff analysis.
Dana?
Yes, I agree.
Brian?
I agree, and I think it actually will change things for the better.
And Ken Visker?
I agree, and there's going to be some happy neighbors.
And number 6, the request is not a use variance and shall not have the effect of allowing any use that is not allowed in the zoning district. Permit a lower degree of flood protection than the regulatory flood protection elevation, or permit standards lower than those required by state law. The analysis in this case is a dwelling on less than 40 acres in the ag, is a conditional use in the ag district, and the proposed location for the building is not located within a floodplain. Larry, I guess, Larry Hafner?
Yes, I agree with staff analysis.
Dana?
Yes, I agree with staff analysis also.
Brian?
I agree.
Ken Visker?
I agree.
And Ken Anderson?
I agree.
The board has voted to approve the findings required to grant a variance. I would ask that, I would look for a motion to approve the findings that were just created.
So move.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and second to approve the requested variance. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Should the board choose to,
That should have been finding of fact, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, that was for finding of fact.
Yes,
That's what we
okay,
voted on.
yes. So we have to do a motion on
A variance.
the actual variance.
should the board wish to grant the variance, staff, I don't believe, is not recommending any conditions. Regarding language, I would suggest a motion to grant a variance to allow a dwelling on a buildable area less than 0.9 acres in area.
Do I hear a motion?
So move.
Second.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and second to approve the variance as presented by our zoning administrator. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. you have a variance.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, let's see, review minutes of prior meeting, where we got this here? We have included in our packet, meetings from Board of Adjustment, July 11th, 2019.
I'll move we accept the minutes as presented.
I'll second it.
We have a motion, a second to accept the minutes of the July 11th meeting as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Do we have any other business? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move. Second.
Motion and second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.